Wonderful. Well, it's start time. So hello, everyone, and
So,
welcome to this fifth in our series of Encore Webinars. These webinars are sponsored by the Schlegel UW Research Institute for Aging and Conrad Grebel University College here in Waterloo, Ontario, and that's in Canada, and the Centre for Aging and Pastoral Studies in Canberra, Australia. My name's Jane Kipfer, and I'm here in Waterloo. And my co-host is Sally Mordyke in Australia. Give a wave, Sally.
hey.
These webinars have their origins in the 10th International Conference on Aging and Spirituality that was held last June here in Waterloo. After the conference, we heard the desire to repeat some of the presentations so more people could benefit and could join in the conversation. So this is our attempt to share the conference further. We're glad you could join us. And yes, we are recording, and you will be sent a link to access the video, as well as the slides and a synopsis of the chat. So today we have Becky King and Meghan Young here to bring us their workshop, Nurturing Spirituality and Creativity in Those Living with Dementia. And we remind you, as in the instructions that came out with your registration confirmation, please have a Post-it note sized piece of paper and some colored markers or pens available for an activity that we're going to do near the beginning of the presentation. So as far as introductions go, I'll introduce Becky and then I'll introduce Meghan. So Reverend Becky King serves as the Director of Spiritual Care at Trinity Communities of Greater Dayton, and as the Dean of Chaplains for United Church Homes, with whom she served for 11 years now. Prior to joining United Church Homes, for 3 years, Becky served as a parish pastor, ordained through the United Church of Christ. Becky received her Master's of Divinity with a specialization in spirituality from the Methodist Theological School in Ohio. She completed 4 units of clinical pastoral education and is a board certified chaplain through the Association of Professional Chaplains. In 2016, Becky was certified as an Opening Minds Through Art facilitator through Miami University in Oxford, Ohio. And since 2016, Becky has co-led several art sessions and art shows highlighting the work of residents living with dementia. And Meghan Young is the Associate Director for Opening Minds Through Art, otherwise known as OMA, at Scripps Gerontology Center. Her career in aging and the arts began in a service learning class during her first year at Miami University, when she facilitated storytelling experiences for residents living with dementia in nursing homes. Since then, Meghan has worked on research projects dedicated to making communities age and dementia friendly, instructed intergenerational service learning courses for 4 years, and assisted long-term care providers with implementing arts-based activities for their residents. She believes everyone, regardless of age or ability, can share their life stories through the arts. So welcome, Becky and Meghan. Thank you in advance for bringing us this webinar that you originally led as a workshop at our international conference. And I'll soon turn the floor over to you. First, just to remind everyone to please mute your microphone while you're listening, and we'll save some time for questions and conversation at the end. So Becky and Meghan, the floor is yours.
Megan's going to share her screen here. First of all, we want to thank Jane and Sally and everyone for this invitation, this opportunity to present this information again. So thanks to both of you, and thanks for everybody who is tuning in today.
And just to echo that, yes, thank you again. This is just a brief overview of what we'll cover. It's a jam-packed hour. We've got a lot of good things to share with you. So this is all we're hoping to do. We're going to start with an art activity that Becky will describe. Becky will talk about defining spirituality and how do we nurture spirituality. And then I'll talk a little bit more about OMA, what that looks like, some research on the program. And then we'll have an example OMA art activity that you can take a picture of. I think you'll get the slides as well if you want to try it out for yourself. And then just some upcoming training opportunities if you're interested in Q&A. So we'll get started.
So when Megan and I present this topic to people, we like to start with an art icebreaker. So we are going to send you off in just a moment to a breakout room. There'll be a few people in each room, and we want you to do 3 things. The first thing we want you to do is obviously introduce yourselves to each other. The second thing we want you to do is define your definition of spirituality. What is your definition of spirituality? The words, the images that come to mind. While you're doing that, we want you to take your little Post-it note or your little square piece of paper and make something similar to this, but it's going to be yours, right? We want you to start with either a dot or it can be a larger circle in the center, and then put concentric circles around that. If you've got colored pencils, markers, colored pens, whatever you have to make the circles stand out a little more, that's great. We're going to send you off now, and we're going to give you 5 minutes to make your art, introduce yourselves, and talk about spirituality. We'll see you back in 5 minutes.
I think we have everyone back, so I'll go ahead and continue. Hopefully that was fun, and you met somebody new. But just as a question for you all, so during the activity, and you can, if you have your video on, you can raise your hand or just kind of give us a wave, but did you smile? And I'll just kind of generally just ask, did you smile? Did you use gestures? Did you nod in agreement if someone was saying something you agreed with? Did you lean in closer maybe to your computer screen? You wanted to engage? Did you feel a positive emotion? And do you feel like you made a connection with that person? So I ask you these questions just to think about the kind of natural instinct you may have had when connecting with that person, and just to kind of showcase how we use art as a tool. As you'll see here, there's the connectivity triangle. So when we talk about OMA a little bit later, but just to showcase that usually there's, you know, a person, 2 people together, and they focus on a task, and that's what kind of makes the connection. But there's underlying things that are going on, obviously biologically. You're more curious, you're leaning in a little bit more, and just the underlying idea of wanting to know, wanting to connect with that person in front of you, or people. Some of you had more than one person in the room with you, so just this idea of making a connection at a very base level, but how that really can improve our mood, and then how art can be a facilitator in that as well. So I think Becky was gonna take over.
Yes. So what we found, that word connection that Megan just talked about, that's all about what spirituality is, right? So that sense of connecting with self. So you just made your own, let me see, there's my art piece. So you just made your own art piece. You connected with self because, you know, you use colors maybe that you like. Someone in our group talked about how that central circle for them really represented spirituality being at their core. So this is you connecting to your own spirituality. Normally, what we would do if we were all in a room together, and we did this when we were in Canada, we had everybody then bring their piece up front, and we created a larger piece. So it's not only about that connection with self, it's connection outside of self. So because we are unable to come together at a central table, we are showing you an example of what that looks like when we connect outside of self. Go ahead and change the slide, Megan. So the reason that we chose this particular art icebreaker is Kandinsky's connection with spirituality. So Kandinsky is one of the founders. He was one of the founders of abstract art. And for him, abstract art allows the artist to really take a look at their inner world. You know, it's not about drawing an apple or a person. It's really exploring what's going on inside the inner world of the artist. He also likes the fact that with abstract art, the artist's emotion and the emotion of those viewing the art, that can bring a sense of connection. So there's that word again, connection. And he often used circles in his work. And he did that for 3 reasons. For him, using circles actually represented spirituality or the spiritual. And he felt that way because he felt that circles represent a sense of wholeness. They represent a sense of the infinite. And for him, circles represent connection. So there's that word again. Megan, you want to change it? So as you talked in your groups about spirituality, what you may have noticed is there was no one definite definition of spirituality. It's subjective. And you might have had similar words, you might have had similar images of spirituality, but we have our own definitions, right, of spirituality. Go ahead and change, Megan. Because of the fact that there is no one definition of spirituality, we wanted to bring a few definitions to you so that you have an idea of what's out there. So for Pulchowski and their work, spirituality, I'm not going to read this. I'm just going to highlight some words that may have popped up for all of you in your definition. Spirituality being a sense of what's a person's meaning and purpose. There's that word again, connectedness, connection to self, others, connection maybe to nature. We talked about the eclipse and being able to connect to nature, to the significant or the sacred. Go ahead and change. This is Donald Kempke's work out of his book, The Essential Spirit. And for Donald Kempke, it was all about looking at domains of life. So for him, spirituality was at his core, and it moved out from there. So for him, spirituality touched his physical life, his social life, vocation. So you can imagine arrows going from that central core out to those other domains of his life. But he also felt that those domains affected his spirituality. So his physical health, his social life affected his spiritual life. So you can imagine that arrow then comes back. So it goes out and right back in. Next slide. So many of us are acquainted with Elizabeth McKinley, and this comes from her work, Methods of Connecting Through Our Spirituality. That can be through relationships. Maybe that's intimacy with someone close to you, a person with, for some, it's God or holy, however you want to name the sacred. For others, it's really the environment. We talked about how much, for some of us, going to the beach is a way of connecting through our spirituality. And the arts can be a way of connecting. We all just connected to ourselves through our individual piece, and then connecting to the larger group through creating a bigger piece. Next slide. I wanted to include Rosalie Hudson's work, her definition of spirituality. As she researched spirituality, she said, you know, what I'm seeing is that there's a word missing in many definitions of spirituality, and that word is love. So I wanted to include a definition of spirituality that has love in it. Next slide. So many of you are acquainted with Brené Brown's work. This is her definition of spirituality. I'm not going to read it. You'll get the slides. But for her definition of spirituality is it's grounded in love. So that way you've got a definition that shows love there. Next slide. So persons who are living with dementia, we've talked about our own definition of spirituality. We've listened to definitions of spirituality within our groups. What about those who are living with dementia? I'm going to tell you, their definition of spirituality doesn't disappear just because they are living with dementia. And in fact, this is from Tovenen's work. they've said that it may even become more important in their life. That sense of connection, that sense of light, of love becomes more vital. Next slide. So this sense of spirituality, right? We can't separate our spirituality out of us. It's part of who we are. It's part of being human. So that goes to understand that those who are living with dementia, their spirituality stays with them. Next slide. I don't know how many of you are associated or have ever read the McKinley Health Institute's work. This came out in the spring of 2022, and it was a study on how to bring more years to your life and more life to your years. It's a fascinating study. What I really liked about it was the fact that they included spirituality or spiritual in the 4 domains of life. So in order to have good, healthy life and to be able to add life to your years, then all 4 of these domains, including your spiritual life, need to be healthy. Well, that is the same for our people living with dementia, right? It's not just enough to keep their physical health going, or their mental health, social health. It's important to nurture their spiritual health, to add years to their life. So how can we do that? How can we nurture the spirituality of people living with dementia? Next slide. This is, again, Tovanen's work. Tovanen and others worked with people in long-term care, taking a look at spirituality and how to nourish spirituality. So for one of the participants, they said that for them, spirituality is their way of traveling. We've just talked about spirituality for us and where we are in our journey, right? And so it's the same for those who are living with dementia. It's understanding their personal journey with spirituality. What gives them connectedness? Who are they connected with in the past? And who are they connected with now? What gives them meaning and purpose? Next slide. So I just mentioned that sense of meaning and meaning and purpose. So another way to nourish spirituality in persons living with dementia is understanding what gives them meaning and purpose. And that can change for us, right? Throughout our journey in life. Same for those who are living with dementia. So we want to ask them what gives them meaning and purpose. We want to talk to their caregivers. We want to talk to those who are close with them to understand what's giving their life meaning. And by knowing that, then we can nourish their spirituality. Next slide. Another way to do this, and this is from Aubert's work, is to understand their core values. So maybe for someone who's living with dementia, one of their core values is hospitality. So how can we nourish that sense of hospitality in them? And when we nourish that sense of hospitality, that core value for them, that is nourishing their spirituality. Next slide. Another way to do this, another way to nourish spirituality in persons with dementia, living with dementia, is honoring their personhood, right? Tom Kitwood, most of us are familiar with Tom Kitwood's work, and that sense of nourishing someone's spiritual, or nourishing someone's personhood. So when we nourish someone's just who they are, when we recognize them, when we respect them, then they feel alive. They feel that their personhood is recognized, right? We recognize another, and that then gives them a sense of personhood. Next slide. I like Aubert's definition here, saying that when we recognize a resident's personhood, That's what spiritual care is. Next slide. So how do we do this? You know, physical touch is a great way to recognize and confirm personhood. Obviously, we always want to ask before you give someone a hug, before you hold their hand. But when we do these things, when we give someone a hug, when we hold their hand, they can feel that sense of warmth. They can feel another person's hand in theirs, and that helps to increase awareness of themselves. And so that is another way of confirming personhood. And these suggestions are from Ode Bear's work. Next slide. So we've talked all about this word connection, right? From the beginning all the way through, and you're gonna hear that word all the way through our talk. Connection, connection, connection. So how do we bring connection to those who are living with dementia? First, just show up, be present. You don't even have to say anything. Just being in the room, being present with someone goes a long way. Loving, we remembered Rosalie Hudson's word, love, that helps to bring that sense of connection and togetherness. And Ode Bear also says, remember empathy. You know, when we can share and sit with someone with their feelings, that helps bring a sense of connectedness and togetherness, and that helps to nourish spirituality in someone living with dementia. Next slide. One of the reasons that we want to do all of these things, especially be present, is we know that isolation and loneliness can affect our well-being. We know that just from living our own lives, right? Same thing happens in persons living with dementia. So when someone feels lonely and isolated, how someone is affected, it's similar to smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day. That's how isolation affects the well-being of someone. That's what loneliness can feel like. So this comes from Holt Lindstad's work. Next slide. We've talked about meaning and purpose, and when we intentionally nourish that sense of meaning and purpose in someone, what gives their life meaning, what they feel then is a sense of safety. They feel a sense of joy and peace, calmness. This comes from Tovenen's work. Next slide. Britt in their work says, you know, when we nourish, again, that sense of meaning and purpose in someone's life, what happens? The cognition of the one living with dementia actually increases. Frustrations for the person living with dementia decrease. And for our caregivers, stress decreases. So I want to give you an example from my own work with those living with dementia. I work in long-term care, and this example happened last year. Walked into a neighborhood where someone living with dementia, she was standing, and just, I could tell that she was frustrated, and I could tell that the caregiver who was talking to her was stressed. And because, you know, we all want to know our people, right? And because I knew her and I knew about her life and I knew about what brings her meaning and purpose throughout her life in the past and now, I knew that music was a good talking point. So I just started talking to her about music. And the more we talked about music, I noticed that her cognition was increasing, her frustration was decreasing. So I asked her about some of the jazz artists that she had seen when she was in her teens and in her 20s. And she was able to talk to me about that because we had been talking about music. And she shared with me a jazz artist that I never knew about that person's name. So brought them up on my handy dandy cell phone and we listened to one of their songs. And she showed me a new dance move. So I learned a dance move that day. And I learned all about a new artist that I had never heard of and heard a song. I then asked her about someone else. Can you give me another name of someone you haven't thought about in a while? And she gave me another name of a band. And we listened to that band's song. And I will tell you, tears came to my eyes as I listened to her sing words to these songs that she hadn't thought about since the 50s. And I was just amazed in that moment. And I happened to catch a glance of her caregiver who was watching all of this unfold. And I could see that their stress had melted away. They were in awe also. So by pausing and being present and taking a moment to talk about this person's, what gives them life, their spirituality was nurtured and they felt safe in that moment. They felt joy. They were able to share. They felt trust. And it was just an amazing experience. I'm sure that if we opened this up to everybody, all 83 of you would share a similar story. Next slide. Another way to nourish spirituality in persons with dementia is through the elements of spirituality that we talked about at the beginning, that Elizabeth McKinley has talked about ways of connecting. So maybe we do that through someone's religion and talk to them about prayer or whatever their, maybe it's scripture or whatever their holy works are. Maybe it's through relationships, who is important in their life. It could be about nature. We love to go outside here and look at the flowers, smell the spring air, especially after it's rained like today. And maybe it's through the arts. So we're going to switch to art here. Next slide, Megan. And so a way to nurture spirituality in persons with dementia is through the arts. It could be poetry. It can be dancing. It can be music, as I talked about. It can be painting. Next slide. I do want to mention Toven in their work. One of the participants in their study said that for them, for music, spirituality is the sensation that grows from music. I couldn't have said that better. I love that. Tovenin also, this comes from their work, and this is another participant's an example from them saying that art and art making and just art in general, if you show a picture of Kandinsky's work, that can be spiritual. Next slide. So we're going to switch to Meghan in just a moment to talk about, we've talked about nourishing spirituality. We're going to be talking about how through OMA, Opening Minds Through Art, we can nurture spirituality through this art program. During OMA sessions, we sing, we make art, we're connected because it's an artist. You remember her triangle. It's the artist who's the person living with dementia. It is the volunteer who's sitting with them as they create art, and the art piece itself. So that triangle of connection. It's all about love that's in the room, finding that sense of meaning and purpose, right? This artist living with dementia, they are teaching us about art as they create this abstract piece. And it's spiritual for sure, because we are nurturing all of those things that we just talked about. So Meghan, take it away.
Thanks, Becky. A great overview. I think I'm going to start with this video just so you get a sense of what OMA is, and then I'll talk about a few specifics.
People with intact cognitions oftentimes try to free ourselves from the limitation of having to draw this thing that looks like that, you know. And when you are free from that, you can then break into the abstract world more directly. So when the ability to express is impaired, they think the content is gone. And that's where the violation of human rights come in, because the human is still there. It's just that they are locked behind the disease. It doesn't mean that there isn't somebody in there that's trying to express. And so art is a sort of a channel. When logical thinking and verbal expression is impaired, art is still there for them to express. OMA is an intergenerational art program for people with dementia based at Scripps Gerontology Center. We put people with dementia one-on-one with Miami students. The students then facilitate the creative process of the elders so that the elders can express themselves in creating art on their own.
And when I see what I do, and I realize how it comes out, I'm besides myself.
Yes, it's called snowflakes. I know that it doesn't look like snowflakes, but it's my vision of what snowflakes should look like.
Very interesting. It makes you stop and think. It makes you wonder.
So the mission of the program is building bridges across age and cognitive barriers. So that bridge is actually relationship, and within that relationship, at the foundation is love.
Give her a little something.
So that just showcased a little bit more about what OMA is I think in a much livelier way than I can do right now, but I'm going to do my best to just share my love for this program and what we get to do with it. So OMA stands for Opening Minds Through Art. The title actually came from Lika Lokan's background. She is Indonesian, and so she spoke Dutch when she was younger, but OMA came first, and then Opening Minds Through Art came later, just as a side story. As she mentioned in the video, it's an intergenerational art program for people living with dementia, which was developed in 2007. And at Scripps Gerontology Center at Miami University in Ohio. Since then, it's been replicated in many locations, including where Becky is at, and she's one of our facilitators that has taken it with her and brought it to her community. And that number is actually a little bit outdated. I think it's over 2,900 now. Miami students have participated, and about 3,000 older adults. And as we've mentioned already, OMA is inspired by modern abstract art. So I'll just flip through some paintings that were all created by people living with dementia. You'll notice a lot of color, a lot of texture, a lot of variety. Our process is failure-free, so we provide steps, about 8 to 10 steps per project, and there's choices built in, so people have the opportunity to pick colors or choose what kind of tools or how they lay things out, what pieces they use. All of that's built in. A lot of the foundation for the program came from Kit Wood's work on personhood. So a person is a person because someone gave them that kind of title as a person mentality. So we teach our volunteers how to connect to that personhood and really enable and help and assist the older adult in making art. But the volunteer or the student, whoever it is, the younger adult, doesn't do any of the aesthetic decision making. That's all the older adult. So everything here created by people living with dementia in the program. And then at the end of every either session or year, sometimes it's a year-long process, we have a beautiful art show to display all the wonderful paintings that were created. So this is just an example in a long-term care community outside of Cincinnati, Ohio, that hosted an art show. And it's just a really fun occasion. Families come, students in this case brought, family members, older adults invite their family members. Everyone just gets together and it's a big party. You can see there's platters of cookies on the tables. Sometimes there's wine and cheese and, all good things. But it's just a real big celebration to celebrate those friendships that have developed, to celebrate creativity. I think one thing that OMA really showcases is people living with dementia can be creative, they can learn new things, but it also showcases their new role as a mentor, a friend, and an artist too. So just some images from this is during we have a dance we do at the art shows as well. So that's during that. But so far we've published 14 studies on OMA. All of them show the benefits for all the participants who are involved. Our most recent one actually involves the virtual OMA switch that we had to do during COVID. So if you're curious about how we made that a virtual program, check that out. Our research, our website, I think is on the list of things, but I'm happy to put it in the chat at the end as well. But I just want to touch on a couple of points to just show what we found in some of the research we've done. So I'll start with the older adults, the artists. One study that was conducted to understand what older adults are perceiving and how their experiences are in the program involved the videotaping. So researchers videotaped and they took video data from 3 different communities, long-term care communities, and they used the Greater Cincinnati Chapter Wellbeing Observation Tool to look at well-being and ill-being among those residents. So in the well-being category, they looked at social interest. Were these people interested in others, interacting with others? Were they engaged in the activities, so their engagement level? And also their pleasure. Were they smiling and laughing, having a good time? They also looked at ill-being when participating in the OMA program. So that included disengagement. Were they just staring off, dozing, not really, engaging with what was happening in front of them? Was there any negative affect? Were they angry or agitated, or sadness or any confusion? So these were the metrics that they were looking for. And the results show, so there were 38 participants that they analyzed the video data of, and they did it in 5-minute intervals. So they observed each time frame at 5-minute marks. And they found on the well-being category that both social interest and pleasure, which are the lines down here on the bottom, generally increased over time from where they started. And they found engagement went somewhat down over time, but that was mostly due to the fact that the art sessions run about 40 minutes. So by the time people are done, they're pretty much done and ready to leave and disengaged with the art activity. But again, the social interest, they were more interested in talking and being with other people by the end of it. And their pleasure, they were smiling and laughing more afterwards than they were when they started. So again, the same kind of graph for ill-being, and they found that there really wasn't a ton of change in ill-being, so no negative affects, sadness, or confusion. A little bit of disengagement at the end, but again, that's just natural. With engagement going down, disengagement would come up. So that's just a little bit of video analysis of what some of the artists, the video data collected showed. But there's also, we do feedback forums at the end of every OMA session, and it's an opportunity for the artists to give their input, their feedback. And sometimes that's not always done in care communities, unfortunately. But it's their opportunity to kind of give a voice to their programming. If they enjoyed the project, did they like talking to their partner or other people? How often were they able to do what they wanted? That's a really big part of what we do, emphasizing that autonomy, that they have control of the process. Do they like their finished artwork? And then do they think their time is well spent? And we also ask a mood question before and after. So there's a series of, it's kind of a smiley face scale, and they circle what they're feeling before they start, and they circle what they're feeling after they have finished. And so the results from those questions that were just on the screen showed that they very much enjoyed their time talking to people. They were able to do what they wanted, and they enjoyed their finished artwork, and they thought their time was very well spent. So 3 is very much, 2 was somewhat, and 1 was not at all when we coded it in the data. And so as you can see here, 2.7 and above for all 5 questions. And then the mood before and after, which wasn't on that first screen with the questions, but again, they showed a face right before they did the artwork and a face afterwards. And as you can see, their mood improved pretty significantly after they participated. I always enjoy reading these comments from older adults. So volunteers have the opportunity to write down quotes that they heard their artists say during the process. So a lot of them talk about being freedom. I love being around people. I've made this. It makes me want to get up and dance. It's amazing how much it changed my attitude. I have a smile on my face. So it really gives them that sense of, I think, community, but also a perspective of they're able to do. They created and they were able to create, kind of touching back to that, nourishing that spirituality piece of it, feeling like we're accentuating that. So, and I love this quote up in this corner. I think the man said, do you know who I am? I'm Michelangelo, when he was presented with his final piece. So we frame each piece at the end of it and they're shown what it looks like. And so I think it's just, again, elevates their perception of who they are and what they can do. And just a brief kind of quotes from college students. So a lot of times we do this work too. I'm based at a university, so I often interact more with college students than I do the older adults. But I get to see this tremendous change, this tremendous growth in students' attitudes towards people living with dementia and just towards older people in general. One of our big mission goals is to kind of fight ageism as well. And so working with college students, I really get that opportunity to share this program with them. But we see students come into the program with their attitude very much, they're anxious to work with someone living with dementia. They're worried, they're scared. They don't know if they'll do something right. But they go through this training program. It's about 2 hours long to be trained as a volunteer for the program. And they get to work with their partner. Things might be awkward at first, but eventually their mindset does shift to friendship. So this person said that they didn't think they would get close to any of the elders, but after 5 weeks of working with her, I had really grown attached to her. It's amazing how you can develop a relationship with someone who can't really verbally communicate at all. So it's just really cool to see that growth with students. And also the elders throughout the process. This is just a quick story. So this painting was done by a man who was a renowned physicist. I think he had won many awards for his work. And he was living in a long-term care community. And this piece was selected to be in the art show that semester. And his wife came up to Dr. Lokan, the founder, and she said, I'm so excited. He's so excited to have this in here. I don't think I've ever seen him more excited than he is right now, knowing that that piece is up on the wall. And this was a man who'd had many accolades and many accomplishments in his life, but he was more excited to have that piece up on the wall. And what was really fascinating and brought out his personality, who he was. So the title of this piece was called Night Chaos. And I think, I believe his name was George, but he also struggled with insomnia. So that kind of brought out his story of, this was his way of reflecting on it, kind of making the most of it, but also sharing his story in a way that was proudly displayed. He was very excited again that it was in the art show at the end of the year. So I'll ask Becky. Becky, would you like me to play this, or do you want to take questions first, or how would you?
I've been answering, there've been a couple of questions and I've been answering those. So
Okay.
I think we can play that.
Okay. Here's just another short clip. This is, again, our founder. She did a fellowship opportunity and she made this video, but it showcases her kind of first interaction and what really lit the kind of spark that became the program that it is.
In 2008, I visited a nursing home in Oxford, Ohio
as a gerontology graduate student. There I met Cora. She was in her 80s. Cora had advanced dementia and was no longer able to talk, walk, or eat on her own. And she had been that way for some years. But what Cora could do is hold a paintbrush and move it ever so slowly to blend colors and create new colors. This is Cora, and this is Cora's painting. All conversations with Cora were one-sided, me talking to her. But I'll never forget when one day I was kneeling next to her wheelchair, talking to her about a painting, and she slowly raised her hand and touched my head. I stopped talking. Then out of the blue, she whispered, "Sweetie." It was the first time she had spoken in years. The nursing home staff was stunned. I knew something really special just happened. Cora had given me a gift. She came out of her silence to declare her friendship. I wanted to share Cora's gift with other students like me. It was then that Opening Minds Through Art, or OMA, was born as an intergenerational art program that pairs students with people living with dementia. Opening Minds Through Art benefits both sides, and we have research evidence supporting this. 94% of students who experienced OMA became more positive in their attitudes toward people like Cora. The elders showed more interest and more pleasure during OMA compared to traditional activities. OMA's innovation lies in recasting people living with dementia from dependent care recipients to artists capable of creating beautiful artwork, and co-educators inspiring high school and college students. Now, Opening Minds Through Art is established in over 200 communities throughout North America, connecting thousands of students with older people living with dementia. Since 2016, the state of Ohio has recognized and funded Opening Minds Through Art as a program that improves the quality of life in nursing homes. We are now coming to an end in state support for the OMA program. But there's still millions of Coras out there waiting for someone to put a paintbrush in their hands, and millions of students whose minds need to be opened by people like Cora. Won't you help us put them together?
That was just like I said, she was part of a fellowship program. So that was something she got to make. But I think it's so special to kind of showcase that initial story of Cora. And we use Cora in our training videos to this day, just to work with someone who was very nonverbal. She needed I'm not sure what they're called, but she had to be like use a piece of fabric to strap her to a chair so she would sit up tight. This was many years ago, so maybe there's better inventions now, but just to kind of showcase that. But we wanted to leave you with this opportunity to engage in an art activity, failure-free. If you joined us at the conference in Canada last year, you may have gotten your kit from us, and maybe you've done it. If not, try to experiment. I guess I would just encourage you to play and just get to know yourself through the process, and like Becky mentioned, just that act of being able to engage and just kind of learn more about your spirituality too. So Becky, anything else you want to add to this?
I don't have anything else.
Okay.
We have just a moment, I know, a minute and a half for questions. If there's a question.
And I will say there's training opportunities. So Becky mentioned she's a facilitator training. If you're interested, you can connect with me. I'm happy to talk more about that with you.
Thank you so much, Becky and Megan. This has been wonderful. Lots of inspiring aspects of this program that we'll all go away thinking about. Sally, was there anything that you wanted to bring up from the chat? I know we don't have a lot of time, but was there anything?
We do have a lot of people thanking. We do have an interesting question from Alan, and Alan, I'm going to actually encourage you to take note of Becky and Meghan's email address, because that's actually a really interesting conversation that might take more than a couple of minutes. But just wondering about whether we're trying to stretch spirituality in an attempt to adapt it to wider aspects of life and nature. So that looks like it could be another very, very interesting conversation. Did you want to make any comment on that at the moment, Becky or Meghan?
Trying to read the whole thing here.
And how would spiritual care differ from usual psychotherapy?
That sounds like a larger conversation
It
than
is
we
a very,
can
yes, very in-depth question.
Thank you, Alan.
begin in 30 seconds. So yes, I encourage you to take that conversation online and maybe
Please, yes, email me
yeah,
and
great.
let's talk.
Thank you. Wonderful. Well, again, thank you to Becky and Meghan. And thank you everyone for joining us. Reminder that you can register for future webinars at grable.ca/SA, and you'll all receive an email with a recording of this attached and information about registering for the next one. So the next one and the last one of this series will be on May 9th with Catherine Mannix from the UK. Catherine is a palliative care physician and author of the book Listen, How to Find the Words for Tender Conversations. She'll be leading us in a thoughtful webinar on listening skills. You don't want to miss that one. And just before we go, Margaret, do you have the slide advertising the June 21st Spirituality and Aging event? Is it
I
possible to
do.
put that
Just one
up if you
second.
have
The
it?
link is also in the chat.
Okay,
There.
excellent. So just a reminder that this in-person and virtual event is coming up June 21st. It's an all-day event entitled From Problems to Possibilities, Faith Communities Enabling Those in the Third of Life to Flourish. And we really hope that you will take the opportunity to participate in that with us. Dr. Mark Roberts is going to be joining us to lead us in that day, and we have hired a great company to provide an excellent virtual experience of the day as well. So it should be well worth your investment. And let your faith communities know about this opportunity to put our heads together and imagine possibilities for our faith communities and people in their third of life and what that can be.
And for those of us who'll be fast asleep while that is on, there is a recording if we do register. So do
Yes, there
listen.
certainly is.
I probably won't get up at 3 a.m. to watch that one. I'm sorry.
Nope. You can't be everywhere at once. Well, thank you all once again for joining us. It's been a delight to be with all of you again, and we'll look forward to seeing you in May. Go well and be blessed.